Most people on the planet have always and still do build their own homes with natural materials. There's some of us who are used to an industrial consumer context where that's not true. I think that that's a temporary situation, and I think that the situation in which heavily processed, highly industrialized, very energy-intensive materials are available relatively inexpensively, that situation is going to change. As energy becomes more expensive, as materials become more expensive, it's going to just make simple economic sense for people to be building with clay and straw. So this is a straw bale wall, which is not yet plastered. You can see it from the outside how it looks when it has the first coat of plaster on. I pretty much grew up building. I've been teaching and writing about natural building sort of as my primary occupation for 18 years. I was there when the term natural building was coined. It was in New Mexico in 1996. Catherine Wanick was the person responsible for coming up with that term. The part to the left of this wall is straw bale, and the part to the right is cob. We'd been calling ourselves alternative builders, but none of us really like that term because we see this kind of construction actually as the norm and industrial construction as the alternative, which has serious problems with it. So we wanted to come up with a term that would sort of normalize what we're doing. This is a cob brick.
That's cob brick? It looks like cement.
Yeah, it's got no cement in it. It's just clay, sand, and straw.
What's that sort of white?
That's a white clay. The properties of your mix are going to depend a whole lot on your clay soil that you're starting out with. And our clay soil here, you can see one of the key reasons or impetuses for people to build this way is wanting to reduce the environmental impact of what they're doing. And the way you do that is you look around and you see, what have we got here that we can build with? A lot of times that ends up being earth. Our soil here is very silty, so it doesn't have a very high clay content, and it doesn't really have any sand in it. So it makes relatively soft cob. The clay is what binds it all together. Clay functions the same way that cement does in concrete. So if you try to make concrete that doesn't have enough cement in it, you'll get soft, crumbly concrete. Likewise, if you try to make concrete that doesn't have enough sand or enough sharp, coarse sand with the right properties, you'll get concrete that doesn't have as much compressive strength. And the same thing goes for cob. So we almost always end up adding a fair amount of sand to our cob mix. That's what's right here in this pile. And we mix that together with our site soil, our clay soil, and then we also add water and straw. This will be basically our communal kitchen, dining facilities, meeting space, office, kids' play space, guest facilities, that sort of thing. If you're counting just the materials, these building systems are much, much cheaper than conventional materials. This building, for example, which is going to end up being about 3,000 square feet, we've budgeted $100,000, which includes all the site work, machine work, the road work, the foundation, etc., etc. So that's really inexpensive for a building that size, but we're not paying anything for labor because we're doing it all ourselves. The cost ends up being pretty comparable to a custom-built wooden or conventional structure. The difference is, with natural building, something like 75 to 80% of the cost is going to end up being in labor. With conventional materials, it's closer to 50-50. So that's a question about where you want your dollars to go. To corporations with which you have no probably direct personal contact, or if you're building out of straw or earth, most of that money is going to pay people that you know, and it's probably going to stay in your community. We're in a stage right now that we're sort of in this process of reinventing the wheel. This is a wall system that we developed here at Emerald Earth that we call clay wattle, which is a variation on traditional wattle and daub, except that instead of weaving with sticks, which is what traditional wattle and daub is, we're weaving instead with bundles of straw and clay. A lot of traditional knowledge about building has been lost irrevocably. And so through experimentation, we're rediscovering what may be the same ways that people have historically built for themselves, probably with some variations. So we do these earthen floors in most of our structures. This is just made out of clay soil, sand, and straw, and sometimes gravel. And it's about 4 or 5 inches thick. And so the winter sun coming through hits on the earthen floor. The floor heats up during the day, as do any thermal mass walls that are close to the south side of the building and are also hit by the winter sun. All that heat is trapped inside the building. And then at night, when the sun goes down and the air temperature drops, the heat works its way back out of the thermal mass and heats the space. There's definitely materials and knowledge that we have access to now as a result of industrialization that our ancestors didn't, that we can incorporate into our homes to make them even more successful, more efficient. Especially understanding about passive solar design, how you can design a building that's going to heat and cool itself, which is really very simple to do. The cob is here for thermal mass. It absorbs heat from the wood stove when the wood stove is going. It also absorbs sunlight directly in the winter coming through these windows. Access to inexpensive glass allows us to build very, very efficient passive solar structures. These windows you can actually just implant directly into the clay, which is way, way simpler than how it's done conventionally in a wooden structure. I'm certainly not advocating tossing out everything that's developed in the last few hundred years and going back to living exactly like our ancestors did. But the basic techniques for how to build walls, how to build floors, how to build roofs, using simple, environmentally benign, healthy, available natural materials, those are the same techniques that people have been using for millennia. And my strong suspicion is that those are going to continue to be the normal building techniques for thousands of years to come.